Welcome to the Passive Income Podcast. I am your host, Dividend Dave. Please be sure to join the Passive Income Posse by clicking that subscribe button below. Super excited for today's episode. Joining me, we have Brian, Twitter handle at Labor to Leisure. I'm going to throw it over to you, Brian, to give yourself an introduction.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me on today. Uh, yeah, basically, I'm a family man. I'm married, coming up on 12 years here. I got two young ones, a boy that's 6 and a daughter that's 10. Uh, Really, my financial path really started back probably like where I got right into it was probably about 7, 8 years ago. Um, Before that, at 25 years old, I started to read a lot of books and learn, just the how a dollar works and, rich dad, poor dad and wealthy barber, stuff like that. But it took me a few years to really kind of put something in motion and start acting on a financial plan. Um, I work for a U.S. corporation in Canada. I've been with the same company for 17 years, so I've learned a lot along the way there. From when it comes to inflation, dealing with different people from all around the world, and yeah, that's about it, Dave.
Nice, that's great. I love the sort of the timeline of your children and the investing. It's like probably around that time that you started to have kids, you started thinking about the future more as well.
Yeah, I mean, kids, you don't realize how expensive kids are until you have them, right? So you really got to start putting something together because if you don't, it's easy to just kind of spend it all. So you got to kind of come up with a plan.
Right. You mentioned the wealthy barber there. I do just have to give a very quick shout out to David Chilton. I tagged him in a tweet yesterday, and he liked the tweet. So that was super exciting for me because the wealthy barber was literally the very first investing book I ever read a long time ago. Like that book's I think over 30 years old now. So I'm sure I read that sometime in the early 90s.
Yeah, it's a really good book, that's for sure.
Yeah, and it definitely, the number one thing I still think about from that book is the concept of pay yourself first. Like that's definitely where I learned it from. Pay yourself first, right? Out of every paycheck, whatever it is. In his book, he says 10%, but whether it's $50, $25, $100 out of every single paycheck, whatever you can put into your investments, do it, right? Pay yourself first.
Yeah, I mean, you start off, let's say, like for myself, I started off with just $50 a month, right? Start putting $50 a month in, and then really your brain starts to turn a little bit and you try to be a little bit more proactive and go, how do I get that to $100? How do I get that to 500 and that and so on, right? And so forth. So it really, once you just start doing it, those books give you that basics. And then if you put it into motion, you're going to see uh, some good value there.
Yeah, no, exactly. And yeah, I agree with you 100% there. When you do start it at that, say $50 a month, the hamster gets on the wheel up here going, okay, how do I turn that into 60, 75, 85, or 100, or like you said, even up to 500, right? And you just watch that. Obviously, the more you can put in, whether it's, every 2 weeks or every month, just the bigger that snowball and the quicker that snowball is going to grow.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it's pretty crazy how fast it can grow. You start looking at your financials as, personal financials, and you realize, oh, do I really need to buy this? You start to realize you may have some not too good spending habits that you start to clean up, and then just kind of balloons from there.
Yeah, definitely. And honestly, you know what? Even after you get into it, I'm sure we all are still guilty of some of those bad spending habits, the impulse buys and other things that maybe you're spending too much money on. But as long as you're still, paying yourself first and or whatever, however way you're doing it, and getting that money into those investment accounts, it, I've said this so many times too. $10 or $25, that's a lot more than zero.
Yeah, I remember a few years ago when I was, putting money aside each month, and I really was dedicated to it. My wife came around Christmas time. We had to buy Christmas presents, and that year was a little tighter than past or prior years. And she's like, "Oh, I guess we're just gonna have to hold off on the investing this month." And I was like, "Absolutely not. We'll figure it out." I made sure when those paychecks are coming in, I put that money in there right away, And then we did figure it out, right? And sometimes you got to just shift your mindset, right? And then see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? Your mom's gonna still appreciate it if you buy her a $50 Christmas present as opposed to a $100 Christmas present, right? Like, so you just kind of have to figure out a way. Like you said, you figured out a way to do it. So
Quality time. That's what mom likes. She likes quality time. The gifts are great, but she would prefer the quality time over
yeah,
anything.
agreed. My mom is the same way. She just wants to spend time with me and my brother and my brother's kids and sort of family, right? So quality time is what's most important, generally to our mothers.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Um, with that said, I'm kind of curious about sort of digging into your portfolio and the different sectors that you like and the different companies that you like within those sectors or the ones that you don't like. I believe you're in Alberta, so I'm guessing oil and gas is probably something that's a fan favorite.
Yeah, maybe about when I first started, actually, my portfolio was like 80% oil and gas because I lived here. And that was before I really started to like actually break down financials, look into the quarterlies and the annuals, and really understand what I was doing. So it kind of hurt me a bit actually because I had way too much oil and gas, and you get into those. That was just after the 2014, 15 oil really just kind of tanked from there,
Right.
and I was almost just kind of buying these stocks on the way down and on the way down and on the way down. In hindsight, if I would have just kept them all and going through 2020 COVID, they'd probably be worth a pretty penny today. But I had to, pull some of that back and reallocate it. So I do like CNQ. That's my favorite in the oil and gas sector. I really doubled up my position in 2020 when oil went below zero somehow.
Yeah.
Um, and then I got some Suncor, and then I got some free hold royalties in there. But a majority of my portfolio, because I never actually owned a bank until like 4 years ago. I was missing them, right? And I was like, I didn't see why everyone wanted them so bad. And then I started to kind of like look into them and realize that I'm using a bank account and my mortgage is through a bank and all these type things. So I started to load up on banks, and that really, was a good time for me to buy them because they really took off from there. And they're about 30% of my portfolio. And then the rest is just kind of tied up in different sectors from healthcare to tech. Utilities is quite large as my second largest sector allocation. And surprisingly, cash. I have lots of the last few months. It was just like the market went up in January pretty fast, and normally I feel I'm maxing out TFSAs and I'm trying to get my RSPs up before the end of February. And I decided to put those in high interest savings ETFs, and I'm glad I did because the markets have been dropping big time over the last few months, and sometimes having that there and not in a company that's been hit by 10-15% like TD or something, it's going
Right.
to create an opportunity in the future.
Yeah, and it's great to have little cash reserve for those buying opportunities when you see them come along for sure. And I'm also kind of going back to your first statement about when you got into it and you had a very large position in oil and gas because you're in Alberta and oil and gas is what you are familiar with. It's what you know, right? You're familiar with these companies. And this actually goes back to a conversation I was having with Anthony at Newcomer Investor on his channel a few days ago. And I was talking about working in Northern Ontario and in Kirkland Lake and how that community revolves around Kirkland Lake Gold, whether you're an investor or not, the whole community revolves around that company, right? And Anthony was like, I don't really know much about Kirkland Lake or, and for some reason, way he segued into oil and gas, and I said, yeah, just imagine if you were in Alberta, right? You would oil and gas would be what you would know first and foremost, right? So I can definitely see how that would be a starting point for you.
Yeah, I mean, even the companies I mentioned, a lot of them, I actually go to those sites quite often. I go to the Shells, I go to the CNRLs, the Suncors. Uh, it's so you're familiar with that area and you're seeing it, right? And uh, you can't see everything, but you can see when there's labor crunches going on and they're really trying to control their spend, or when they're not, they're delaying projects and stuff like that. So you do get that, inside there for sure.
The first-hand perspective, you seeing it with your own eyes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it can look like it's good too, though, right? It looks like everything's kind of going good, but you might not realize if oil's $40 a barrel, that company's like barely getting by, right?
Right.
So, I mean, that oil price makes a big difference for these companies. If it's higher, they want to pump as much as they can in that time, and that's where you're going to see those, those profits going up. So,
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Before we get any further into it, I am gonna give a shout out to, Buy Investing Shirts. As you know, you can get the Passive Income Posse merch and ball caps, toques, hoodies, and you guys have seen me wear the Dividends t-shirt as well. So, link in the
that's
description
awesome.
below. I use code word Posse for 5% off. Patrick has some incredible merchandise over there. Like I said, hats, toques, t-shirts, hoodies, coffee mugs, all sorts of interesting stuff. So definitely check out his site. And yeah, if you're gonna buy anything, definitely use code word Posse for a 5% discount. Okay, I've got two things now. I was gonna circle back to Canadian banks, but I see the Tim Hortons.
Yeah, yeah, I got a Tim Hortons this morning. It's pretty much my go-to, and yes, I do own QSR. Uh, I like Tim Hortons. Some people don't, but when I go to work, that's what I see all around the office. It's either that or Starbucks. And uh, uh, was it last year they were kind of struggling, and people were worried about the pandemic when people are going to go back out and do, go through the drive-throughs and stuff like that. So when I saw that, that stock really struggling, I bought in because I knew as soon as things opened up, people would get back into those daily habits.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And personally, I don't own QSR, but obviously, I agree with you 100%. There was like you go to almost any workplace anywhere in Canada, and you're gonna see Tim Hortons coffee cups, so or Starbucks, but, a lot of Tim Hortons, and obviously, the QSR also has, Burger King, and what other one do they have in their portfolio?
They have Popeyes as well.
Popeyes, right,
Yeah, and Popeyes, I don't know if you've had it, but it's like amazing compared to any other chicken place, in my opinion.
right. No, I've never had Popeyes. I'm not even sure if there's
Oh,
one here
you
in
gotta have
Canada.
it.
I live in a very
Right.
small or near a very small city, so we don't have a lot of the same options that, some of the bigger centers have, so
Yeah,
there
they've
might be one
really
here, I
started
honestly
to
don't
blow
know.
up in Canada. You're finding Popeyes like everywhere now, and I wanted to see the other day. Like we don't usually eat out too much, but I brought Popeyes home, and my daughter, she's kind of picky, and she ate it. And she's like, "Oh, this is really good." And so I think it was the next day I went and bought her like KFC, just a couple pieces of chicken, and brought them home. And she was like, "This is greasy. It's gross." And like it was just I wanted to get it from her perspective because I thought the same thing, but
Yeah.
it's definitely it's definitely tender. They got a good flavor in that chicken base.
Nice, nice. So that's another one of my great concepts. I call it turn that cash register around. So if you're a customer of Tim Hortons or Popeyes and you're investing in that company, that's great to see, right? You're getting them to pay you to go and pay them, basically, right?
Yeah, 100%. You can have 100 cash registers. I kind of look at it the same way. I'm paying a power bill or a gas bill or uh, I'm paying a mortgage. There's so many different ways to look at that, but it's true. I mean, if you believe in those companies aren't going anywhere, and in Canada, I mean, we see it with the banks. There's only so many banks. It's not like the U.S. where there's basically hundreds of banks. Here, there's the big five, six, and then a few small ones, but that's it. So
Right.
they really have the market that way.
Yeah, exactly. And uh, sticking with the Canadian banks too, one of the things I absolutely love to point out, it was actually from a tweet I want to say last October at Settling Nomads tweet, and I've retweeted this so many times, and I've sent this same tweet to so many people, and it points out the consistency and longevity of the Canadian banks paying a dividend. The one I think it's either Bank of Montreal or Bank of Nova Scotia paying a dividend since 1829. So in 6 years, they're coming up on a 200-year anniversary of paying dividends, which is just phenomenal, right? And all the other big five are well over 150 years of paying dividends as well. So it's just you can't argue with that consistency and that longevity.
Yeah, and they're known to, not only do they pay it, but they raise it, right? And a few years back, I mean, I wasn't right into dividends at first, but then uh, I'm a pretty busy guy. I'm a family guy. I'm out at dance studios. I coach hockey for my little guy, and I don't have as much time as maybe I'd like to have. And I found that dividends kind of talk to me a little bit more because I could find really good, solid companies that pay me along the way, and then just reinvest those dividends. Which you probably heard that quite often from a lot of people on your podcast here, but it's a real thing, and some of us don't have time to be sitting there clicking a clicking a mouse and trying to do some day trading and stuff like that. We're looking for a little bit more stability, and dividends can provide that.
Yeah, definitely. Dividends are, the sleep well at night investment. And, you know, day trading is a whole different animal. I work a full time job as well, Monday to Friday. I'm not going to be sitting in front of a computer trying to day trade. I just don't have the patience for it or anything. It doesn't interest me. But yeah, with the dividends, whether they pay monthly or quarterly, so just every month or every quarter, you get this dividend just automatically shows up into your account. And then, yeah, you can take that, whatever it is, 10, 25, 50, $100 and just reinvest it right back in. So, every single month you're giving yourself a raise basically, right?
Yeah, and it takes a while, right? When you first start down that path, I mean, you're getting your $7, you're getting your $10, and it doesn't feel like it's moving all that much, even for the first, few years. And now that I'm into that seventh year, I'm starting to see that compound where, like for Manulife, for example, I'm getting something like 7 shares a quarter, right? Where when I first started, I was getting one. So you just kind of just keep sticking with it, and then it's really starts to kind of take off from there and compound, and that's where it's at. Like the compounding is what's gonna give you that wealth later down the road that you can decide what you want to do with it then, right?
Yeah, that's a great example going from dripping 1 share, up to 7 shares over just really not that long of a time frame, like 6, 7 years goes by pretty quick, as we all know, right? So, that is
Yeah,
a
it feels like a long time though. That's a thing, right? It's like the strategy is kind of slow, but then once it gets to a certain size, you really start to see. It was a couple years ago for me. I think 2020, 2021. That's when I started to see the dividends, like the banks. They paused for a little bit, and then they came out with these huge raises, and CNQ, they could have cut their dividend, they never did. So they, now it's been going up massively each year.
right.
Even the small banks are providing. Some are giving, like EQB is giving out basically a dividend increase every quarter right now, and over the last like I think like 4 quarters or something like that, and really starts to take off. So you just kind of let it go and keep adding, and you'll never get the day traders. They can make big money doing that, but they can also lose a lot of money. Where I find with the dividend side, uh, if you have the right companies, of course, they can really just kind of get through those tough times. And then if you're adding in those areas, you'll later down the road, it'll pay off in a big way for you.
Yeah, just for clarity there, you said the Canadian banks paused, and they did not pause their dividend, they paused their dividend increases.
Yeah,
But
correct. So
again, over 200 years, consistency, longevity, not every single one of those 200 years they had dividend growth. But as you mentioned, they've come back strong recently with that dividend growth. And yeah, just you know, you're giving yourself a raise by buying more dividends. They're giving you a raise, hopefully once a year by raising their dividend payout. And I agree with you 100% that dividend investing is just so much easier than trying to day trade.
yeah, I mean, just I tried it, right? I tried it years ago, and I was all like stressed out, and then I would miss something because I was working, and I would try to be looking at my phone all the time, trying to see what's going on. So I mean, I just found it like mentally difficult, and takes a lot of time, right? Where dividend investing, you can go to work, and I don't look at the markets typically. I'll look at them first thing in the morning, kind of see what any headlines have come out or headlines on the back end, but I'm not too concerned about what's happening throughout the day. If it drops for a month, that's okay. I mean,
Yeah.
now I'm looking at, okay, I want to add to my banks. Which bank am I going to add to now, right? So it's definitely easier on the mind when you're not stressed out every single day.
Yeah, I look at it about 3 times a day, and simply for, like, same as you, look at it in the morning to see any headlines, look at it around noon just to see if it's green or red, and then look at it around close just to see if it's green or red, and it doesn't really matter to me either way if it's green or red. I guess I just kinda like to know for what happened that day or that week, right?
Well, on some days you want the red. Like I'm because I'm not touching this stuff for years. So I'm looking for like what's happening right now. I want those banks to come down quite a bit, and so I can add to them at a really good price because they did get a little bit overvalued in my opinion.
Yeah,
A few over the last couple of years, and it's kind of come back. And TD, for example, has just been absolutely hammered because they're tied to the US and that whole Silicon Valley stuff going on, right? So
yeah.
it is creating opportunity for long-term investors. So I didn't buy right away because I have been through this before. I learned the hard way with oil and gas that you just gotta just kind of let it settle out a little bit. Then when you see it kind of tick up a bit, then you add. So that's what my plan is for this market right now.
Yeah, so do you how many of the Canadian banks do you have?
I have TD, I have CIBC and BMO, and that is it. I think I have three.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then I have some of the insurance companies as well to kind of tie into that financial. Maybe a little too heavy in that area, but Manulife is just always looked good to me, so I've always added to it. But
right.
now I'm kind of letting it grow, and hopefully it has its day one day with these higher interest rates. I think that will benefit insurance companies over the next several years.
Yeah, I see nothing wrong with that mix of those 3 banks and Manulife. That seems very reasonable to me.
Yeah, I'm at the point now where I'm kind of like, I think I want to trim it down to two and get a little bit more, dividend reinvestment plan kind of going and get those dripping because uh, sometimes you're looking at it, you get the cash and that's great, but right now banks are they're very attractive to me, so I'd rather be getting a few more shares here and there. So I am looking at that, but it's hard to make that. I don't like hitting the sell button on the banks either, so it's tough.
Yeah, I agree with you there. It's like and right now, yeah, I agree too. Some of the banks for me, it's Bank of Nova Scotia is the one that's looking the most attractive right now, and I just keep adding, a couple shares every paycheck and just keep just keep stacking it, and every
They'll
2 or
have their
3.
moment one day. All of them will. That's why I
Yeah.
always look at it. It's hard to pick which one is going to be the one that performs the best. I mean, we know the ones that are a little bit larger, so your Royal Banks and your TDs. But BNS has struggled the last several years, and they're going to have their day though, and it'll take off. So it's all about just patience. Patience is number one in all of this. You just have to be calm and collective, and just stick to your plan, and you'll be okay.
Time in the market beats timing the market.
100%. I already tried that. I'm like, oh, I'll sell this here. And when it drops back here, I'll buy it. And it didn't work out so much. So I totally agree with you.
Switching sectors, let's jump into telecoms. Obviously, we have, Bell, Telus, Rogers, the couple smaller players being, Quebecor in Quebec. I believe is SaskTel still a thing or an MTS in Manitoba? I'm not sure if they've been bought up by Bell or Telus yet. I'm not sure what's going on there, but obviously the big 3, Bell, Telus, Rogers. Any thoughts on the telecom sector?
Well, it always seems very expensive. That's a thing I've noticed with those names, and it's we see them in our households, right? You got Shaw here in Alberta. It's pretty popular, and I think they're getting purchased by Rogers or trying to get it purchased through them. But surprisingly, that's one sector I don't own in. I felt like it was always so expensive, but now I'm starting to see a little bit more attraction there. And but if I was going to pick one, and when I do, it will be Telus, just because it's in my area. I don't see too much Bell in Alberta. It's mainly Telus. They got security. They got Telus Health now as well. And then they got like the company I work for. We have 25,000 phones out there for our employees, and they're with TELUS. So I mean, TELUS seems to be the one that sticks out, and I feel they're a little bit more um, diversified compared to some of the other names.
Yeah, so a couple things there. Yes, Rogers has been trying to acquire Shaw for it's been going on for ages. Like I think it's going on for over a year now. So I'm just hoping that eventually that comes to some kind of conclusion. Um, the TELUS and Bell, it's kind of always been historically like that, where TELUS has a much larger market share in Western Canada and Bell has the larger market share in Eastern Canada. However, they both operate in Eastern and Western Canada. So, you know, I don't think you can really go wrong with either of them. The share price of TELUS does look a little more attractive simply because it's literally half the price of a Bell share. So you can, basically get more shares for you can get twice as many shares for your same amount of money. Um, I do hold Bell, and yeah, TELUS is high on my watch list as well. So those are kind of my thoughts on the telecoms. And again, the reason that I picked Bell first over TELUS is because similar to what you mentioned, is I my cell phone I pay it to Bell, so that's who I am trying to like get the shares up there. That's again going back to my concept of turn the cash register around. I want them to pay me to pay them, right? So
Yeah, and I guess I got to clarify. I do own Quebecor, so I do own one of them, the smaller one, and I like that one because if that transaction goes through with Shaw and Rogers, they actually have. It looks like they're selling the was a Freedom Mobile to
correct,
Quebecor, which I really like that because that'll allow Quebecor to kind of get out of Quebec and move into other areas because Freedom Mobile is here in Alberta. So there's that for sure. But one thing I wanted to mention is that I don't remember what company it was, but last year TELUS had purchased a company, a smaller company, but then they sold the East rights to Bell. So it's like they're in it together. They're respecting their areas. So
right.
that just brought that back. I remember reading that. I just don't remember which company it was.
Yeah, so, just, that one, a condition of the sale of, Shaw to Rogers, a condition of that sale is that Shaw sells Freedom Mobile to Quebecer, and then, yes, Quebecer has a much larger presence across the rest of Canada outside of Quebec. Um, so it's definitely a a win-win for anybody who is a Quebecor holder for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely brought the because the Quebecor was kind of moving up and down. It was very inconsistent for a couple of years there, but once that was announced, it's kind of gives some stability to that stock price, and of course, the market's going to act one way or another if that deal, falls through. We know it would happen, but the risk reward to me seems like a pretty good one to take because they still have a pretty relatively good business just in Quebec alone.
Right. Let's jump to another sector. One of my favorites is REITs. One of my favorite REITs is RioCan. What are your thoughts on REITs?
I don't own too many of them, but I'm looking at acquiring more of them just because you can get, eight, nine, 10 companies sometimes in one. I do own for REITs. I do own Granite. I like their basically the people that are in their buildings that they rent to. I think they're 99% leases rented, so I do like that one. But I have looked at RioCan in the past, but once they cut that dividend or however you want to call it there, but I
Yep.
think it was a year and a half ago, I decided to kind of step away and go, nah, I took it off my watch list. I'm trying to find those companies that don't cut, and we don't always get our way. Sometimes we have one come out of the blue and hit us, and
Yeah.
you always have. It seems like a bad day when that happens. So you think you got it figured out, but not too much rights.
So with RioCan, I actually got into RioCan after that dividend cut, so I timed it well. Not that I was trying to time the market or anything. And then just recently, last month, they actually had a small dividend raise, so they are starting to come back. And but yeah, I do have a few other REITs that I've had living through the dividend cut, and it's not fun, but that's part of the game as well, right?
Well, you're going over a span of a long time, right? Like, who saw stuff like COVID even happening, right? It's never happened in our lifetime, and it's something you just can't really comprehend. And when that happens, companies have to do you almost appreciate the dividend cut when it comes because you know they're just trying to manage the business, right? And it's not always they know it's going to be negative by the market, but in saying that, I mean, if you look at Algonquin, AQN, when they cut their dividend, I mean, prior to that, people saw the dividend cut coming and it kind of put it out there that it was going to happen. The stock just kept dropping down. Now, I didn't add, but I own quite a few shares and I've kept it this whole time. But I mean, that was the time to add, right?
Yeah.
All this negativity around, and you're looking at this company, they do have a they have a good they have a good company. Yeah, they got some debt, but some of their assets are pretty impressive. So sometimes you gotta jump in on those opportunities. So good on you to do that with RioCan.
Yeah, so same thing with, for me with, AQN is that my position is very small, so of course, the dividend cut still hurt, but again, I agree with you, the writing was on the wall. The dividend cut was in January, and the writing was on the wall all through December, even back into last November, and once it happened, it was almost like well, again, this is what Anthony and I were talking about the other day on his channel, it was ripping the Band-Aid off. It was just like, "Okay, we've ripped the Band-Aid off, and now we can move forward," right? Like, give that scab time to heal. Another thing on that AQN is at the time that dividend cut happened back in January, I tweeted out saying, "Is this the time to be greedy while others are fearful?" Because I was really, really tempted to buy more AQN at like, what was it? Below $9 Canadian per share. And I was like, I was so tempted. And in retrospect, I probably wish I had have done it, but I never did pull the trigger. And that goes back to that, the mindset and the psychology is it's very tough to be greedy while others are fearful. It really is.
Yeah, no, for sure. And even with some of my small growth companies over the years, I had a rule: is I'd buy them, and if they doubled, I would sell half the position and then ride out the remaining shares. And I still stick to that to this day. Which with growth stocks hasn't happened very often, just because they've been hammered. But
Yeah.
the dividend portfolio has kept the the portfolio pretty strong. So.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I've heard that strategy before with growth stocks. The problem is how often do they double? That is obviously the difficult one there.
Well, I
Jumping
get
to
that one quite often. Years ago, when interest uh, rates were really low, those
right.
companies could borrow for cheap, and they were able to really just grow their businesses and drive those stock prices pretty high. Now it's pretty much the opposite. Now you got to figure out which ones are going to make it, and that's the challenge because there's some that there might be a good company, but if they're if they have all this debt and 90% of their stuff is funded by debt at these higher interest rates, they have to perform now, and that's the tough part. So you got to really be picky about what you're picking up, and
For
those
sure.
interest rates are going to hurt those companies for quite some time, as we've seen.
Another sector I like to talk about, and I do kind of lump the two together, is consumer staples, consumer discretionary. So, sort of food, basically, right? Everybody eats every day. I feel that things in the consumer staples are somewhat recession proof or are recession proof because you and I, especially you with a family of four, you're going to buy groceries. You're probably spending quite a bit on groceries these days. Um, Do you look at any companies like here in Canada? Obviously, we have your Loblaws and Empire, and I don't. You might not have Metro out west, but um, so and then obviously we have Costco and Walmart too. If you're going to jump into U.S. American stocks, what are your thoughts on the consumer staples, consumer discretionary?
Well, I don't own any of them. I follow all of them, but I don't own any of them. I find that they're right now with just with what's going on with the governments and putting a lot of pressure on those companies. It's not a good. I personally think it makes it harder for them to gain margin in the business right now. But I mean, more I regret not owning them over the years because you're right. I mean, we're
People eat every day.
Well, exactly, and we go to Costco. There's four of us, and we're on the go all the time. So we're always buying in bulk, right? We get creative. They got this Costco. It's like a it's like the restaurant wholesale place here in Edmonton, and where you can buy like boxes of like fish. You can buy 60 fillets and stuff like that. So we do a little bit of that too, just to kind of deal with the inflation of it all. But don't own any of the names right now.
Yeah, so and nothing in the so consumer discretionary, I would kind of categorize more like your Coke and Pepsis, things that they're there at the grocery store. You don't need to buy them, but odds are good you're going to buy something that's from a Coke or a Pepsi type of company. And here in Canada, I have two that I kind of lump into the consumer discretionary, being Pizza and another one called SRV, which is a royalty fund that owns like Jack Astor's and a few other type of restaurant chains type like that. So, and those ones I bought sort of similar to your one story about buying low during the pandemic, where I was like, I thought I was just being like, I thought I was being the dumbest person ever by buying restaurants during the middle of the pandemic. But 2 years later, I'm quite happy with those decisions.
Yeah, no, I mean, those companies aren't going anywhere. As we become a busier society, we're always going like that fast food side. Like we don't have pizza here. We have the Pizza 73 here.
Right.
Like it's pretty big in Western Canada here. But I mean, you tend to be picking stuff up or ordering stuff in, or I mean, I couldn't tell you how many people at work, they have skip the dishes on their phone, and they're like, food's just getting delivered to like each office, like it seems like 3 4 times a day, and it's become a pretty common lifestyle that I think is here to stay, just due to everyone liking everything fast and things moving quickly. So
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. So don't own any consumer staples or discretionary, but following along because everybody eats every day. So I think it's a good sector to look at. You did mention off the top healthcare, and I believe you mentioned technology. So anything in those two sectors that you want to dive into?
I own a few different healthcare. I'm trying to think of the ones on off the top. I own a really small company, but they don't pay a dividend, in Wealth Technologies. They're basically your online doctors. They also own a lot of the doctors' offices, and they've started to really grow. So that's a good one. I get recommend people to at least look at, because I really think that 10, 15 years we'll continue to see healthcare being done exactly how we're having this podcast right now. You're talking to the doctor, telling them what's going on, and some things don't necessarily need to be treated
In
in
person.
person. So I really like that area. And then medical devices, I do own Medtronic in the U.S. That was one of my only, I think my only buy this year has been Medtronic, and they deal with defibrillators and stuff of that, pacemakers, stuff like that. Uh, and I really like that area as we see things start to open up again, and people back going back, and you saw so many surgeries and stuff like that get delayed like a year and a half, and you're starting to see that come back, right? Because now you got this backlog of people that really need knee replacements or whatever the case is, right? So I like that area, and I felt like that company's fairly valued. They got a nice dividend, and I like their payout ratio, so I'll own that one. And can't think of the rest I own right now at the top of my head. So
That's fine.
how about you?
The only one that or I guess two, but they're REITs is Northwest Healthcare, and that one I'm very nervous right now. Obviously, NWH owns as a REIT owns doctors' offices and medical clinics and whatever other like healthcare properties in its REIT. And that one I'm right now also very nervous for a dividend cut. The share price has been dropping, and I'm not 100% sure why. Another one is also a REIT EXE, and they are more into the seniors homes, and I believe they also do like the long term care as well. So, sort of my two plays in healthcare are REITs within the healthcare sector.
Yeah, I mean, there's Sienna out there. and that's the other one I own actually is Savaria. Savaria is I'm big on. They pretty much first they come into your home and they set up those what do they call them? They're like the stair elevators, stuff like that. Pretty unique market. But Sienna and Chartwell was another one that you probably heard of. I did own those a few years back, but when the pandemic kind of hit, I wasn't really liking that area just because I saw what was happening. I had some family in the senior homes, and it
Right.
was a real struggle. You saw people moving out, and I was like, I need to get out of this. It didn't seem very healthy, so I got out, and I'm kind of glad I did because I think I was looking at those stocks the other day, and they haven't done so well since over the last couple of years.
Right, and then did you mention technology off the top as well?
Yeah, I got some technology. Let's see if I have my list here. Just trying to think what I own too many companies. I'm up to about 40, and I would like to bring that back a little bit.
Yeah,
Um,
so that's been another hot topic, here lately on the Passive Income Podcast is how many shares or how many different companies do you own or how many different positions, and is it too many? Because, I've had some guests that are only have 10, and then I've had other guests that are over 70, and I've had pretty well answers everywhere in between. For me right now, I think I'm at 23 total positions, including a couple of ETFs. So, and for me, that 20 to 25 number is okay. There are more companies I would like to add, but I keep saying to myself, Dave, keep it under 30. Just keep it under 30.
yeah, I'm at about 39, and just it seems like you're like, oh, this company looks like a good company, and things look good, so you add to them, and you're not reducing any on the other side, right? So I mean, I do have 39, but a lot of them are like smaller, really small growth companies that I've just kind of held over the last several years that haven't
Right.
done so well. So they kind of bring the number up a bit, but it's still too high. I mean, you can only read so much and keep track of so much. You try to, but
Well,
some
exactly.
people just go with 100 or 150 of solid companies and it works out for them too. So I don't think there's one way or one answer or,
No,
it's,
there's definitely no one right answer. Like, oh, it has to be 15. That's doesn't seem to be a right or wrong way of doing it.
yeah, I mean, you could just buy one bank though, and you could just, if you believe in that Canadian bank, you keep adding to it and not own any of the other ones. And now you have one position instead of five. They're roughly going to pay you pretty close to the same amount. Then one will be 1 to 2% different, right? But
Yeah.
depends on what how you want to have your portfolio set up.
Circling back there to technology, did you find the tech stocks that you have?
Yeah, a lot of them are small growth companies actually in Canada. So there's like CloudMD, and that's another online doctor. I do own a little bit of LSPD and Nuvi Corp. So, but other than that, I don't know them too much. I mean, I am sitting, like I said, I'm sitting on a boatload of U.S. funds in a high interest savings in one of my accounts that I'm looking at putting to work here pretty soon. And
Yeah.
but in the meantime, I may as well collect a 5 point, I think it's 5.9% return guaranteed. So uh, what I like about the ETF is I can sell it and I can put it to work tomorrow, right? I don't have to. It's not locked in like a GIC where I have to leave it in there for a couple of years to get that return. So um, if we get on the podcast here in a few months from now, I'll probably have some new information on some of the US names I've added to.
Nice. Um, Going back to like you working in Alberta and being familiar with oil and gas and out on those job sites and you see the equipment that's being used there, the heavy industrials, and the first company name that comes to mind for me is obviously Caterpillar. You're looking at your excavators and rock trucks and bulldozers and skid steers and all of the machinery. And I don't even know what other types of machinery are get used on in the oil and gas sector, but I'm sure there's tons of them. I guess any thoughts on like that heavy industrial sector?
What I see out there is, I mean, you got your Suncors and stuff, and they own a certain amount of that type of equipment. Uh, Due to inflation and interest rates really climbing, what we've seen a lot more of is uh, companies renting. like they're renting that equipment, right? Rather than purchasing it just because it's just kind of not somewhere they want to spend their money. Like I work for a large corporation, and when things get like this, you tend to just rent. You rent is to fill in those gaps until things kind of settle down, and then you can go out and acquire some equipment. So you do see Caterpillar and names like that out there quite often. They're not going anywhere. There's a lot of infrastructure going on. A lot of carbon captures being built out there, and new clean diesel being at another like imperial oil site. So you're seeing all this good stuff out there, and there definitely there's some of that going on, and I think that's good for those companies.
Quick question, and don't want to spend a lot of time on it. Just the railways in Canada, Canadian National, Canadian Pacific. Thoughts?
Uh, my brother actually works for CN Rail, so he's been there I think 6 7 years, and I'm gonna tell you he don't stop. He's always going, and you know that based on that window behind you, right? That's
You've seen it. You've seen enough episodes to know.
yeah. I think I watched one yesterday, and you were mentioning it, but I think I've seen a couple tweets about it too, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It's a very good moat for CN and CP. I mean, they own the land to where those tracks are, and no one can build another railway without their approval, and we know that's not happening. So there's some really good names. Again, those are another couple companies that you just buy and you put in your portfolio and you just let it do its thing, right? Because it ain't going nowhere. But it always does feel a bit expensive from a valuation perspective, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. I do have your website here as well, Labor to Leisure, which is also obviously your Twitter handle. So yeah, let's just talk about what you've got going on over here.
Yeah, so Labor to Leisure really was kind of trying to find a name when I first started this website. It's mainly updates. I'm getting into a habit now more about when I also make purchases that I'm kind of doing a breakdown on the company and really my opinion on what I like about that company.
Like this one here, your
So
new purchase 2023 of that one you just mentioned, the Medtronic.
yeah, exactly. So I go into detail on the company, what they do, and why I think they're attractive right now. And then I just do my money while you sleep monthly edition. Basically, go through what my dividends are each month, any increases that I've had, any purchases or sells in that month, and I give a little bit of an update on my day to day life. Family, and some of the things we're doing. Because sometimes I feel like we talk so much about the investing side that people think it's boring. You probably go to work and people don't want to talk about investing with you, and it's just a mind frame for them. But I like to show people that you can grow a really good portfolio and a good dividend strategy and still have a life, right? Like outside of that, right? It's not like that's all you're doing all the time. I really believe in balance, and you can't take it with you, so you want to enjoy those moments and book those trips, and my thought on it is if you need more money, then go make more money so you can do all the things you want to do while you're growing your portfolio.
Nice. So I definitely will link that website in the description below. So if you'd like to check out Brian's uh, blog posts and different insights, you can definitely click on that below and head over there to check that out.
Yeah, I got some goals in there as well. So I kind of set goals every year, and some of them are financial goals. Sometimes I throw some personal goals in there that we like to do if it's a family trip or we're doing a renovation. And that all started really to keep myself like, if I put it out there, then I'm gonna do it, right? Like if you write it down, it's gonna happen. If you don't, then you're probably not gonna do it. I really believe in that. So that's
Yeah.
where it all started, is hey, I'm gonna do this dividend growth strategy. I'm gonna post about it. I'm gonna keep myself accountable for it. And it's you get some comments and messages and emails from different readers that read it, and they thank you for what you're doing. And I was writing when I was making like $18 in a month, right? And but people respect that, right? They see you have a goal and you're sticking with it. And I think I'm coming up like this month on almost $700 in dividends just in March, which will be one of my highest. It is my highest month ever. So it can grow from something very small to something very large. You just have to stick with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And we've talked about that here on the passive income podcast with many other guests about how on Twitter too, you'll see somebody posting a tweet of, "Hey, I made a 50-cent dividend," or "I made $5," or like you said, $18, or right up to the, I mean, you know the ones I'm talking about. The post they made like 5 or 7 or six or 7 grand in a month, and but the reaction seems to be all the same. Like, good job, great going. You know, whether it's that $5 or that 500 or 5 grand, everybody is just like, you know, supportive and patting each other on the back saying, "Good work, good job, keep it going, brick by brick, keep that snowball rolling," right?
Oh, it's so important, right? I mean, you have someone like Bob. I think it's Taquan.
Yeah, I know who you
I don't
mean.
know if I'm saying it right. So sorry, Bob, if you're on here, but he's grown just an unbelievable portfolio, and it's just amazing. And it's posts like that when I go into his and I read that, I go, okay, well, the reason he has this is it's brick by brick. He's taken one step at a time, and he's grown it to be something pretty solid. So those are the type of people I want to be reading what they're putting out there. And but yeah, he's and he'll say good job. You'll see his comments on someone that made $10 that month, right? And he's like, oh, good for you, right? He's showing that love back, right? Because he knows that at one point that was him.
Yeah.
So that's the nice thing about the Twitter community. I mean, 3 years ago, I had a Twitter account. I wasn't on it for like 8 years, and then all of a sudden I went there and I was like, oh, I found this investment community, and I was like, oh, this is awesome. I can follow the people that inspire me, or you can pick whatever it is. It doesn't necessarily have to be investing; it be anything, but you can set it up your platform with what you want to see on a daily basis. And that's so I spend a lot more. Like, I love Twitter now. I went from, I think, 3 followers for 9 years to I think over 700 or something, and it just starts to grow from there because you meet just more great people along the way.
Yeah, so for me, I'm gonna give a shout out to Dividend John, similar to what you're mentioning with Bob, like, just, building that over time. And, John's one of the ones that, every month posts about the 6 or 7 grand. And but he's right there, also congratulating somebody that's made 50 cents, $5, $10, because he knows he was there too, 15, 20 years ago. And he's just there to help and encourage. And he's asked me before, he's like, "I hope my tweets don't come off as like I'm bragging." And I'm like, "No, John, not at all. They exact opposite, actually. They don't sound like bragging at all. They sound very much like you're just saying, 'Hey, listen, I'm an average guy that did it, and if I can do it, you can do it too.'"
And that's so important what you just said there. Like, so Dividend John, amazing, right? I really like I've watched the episodes you've had him on. Uh, he keeps it simple, right? He has a good backstory. Reminds me of as me as a kid. He didn't come from a wealthy family or anything like that, and he took the strategy and kind of just stuck with it. And I think he's coming up on like $60,000 in dividends, I think, this year or something like that. And that's
I I
pretty
think he'll be
impressive.
passing 70 this year.
Yeah, so I mean, like, that's just, and you're right. He's just seems like an average guy, right? And he eats well. I know that. I see him showing
Yeah.
me steak pictures and stuff. So I like seeing that stuff because that's kind of same kind of area I want to get to is in a few years here.
Yeah. Before we sign off and wrap it up, any final thoughts?
Well, thanks for having me on. You're a really good host, and I
Oh,
really
thank
like
you.
what you're doing for the community. And um, lots of good things going on, and you're doing one every week,
Oh,
sometimes
sometimes
even
it
more.
it it fluctuates. Sometimes I'll have 3. I think there was one week I even did 4, and then there's other weeks where I just don't have anybody scheduled, so it becomes none in a week. So it's been about 10 or 11 per month since I started this back in the start of October. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's that consistency, right? So we're getting a lot of good. I like to see some of the faces you've had on here that I've followed them on Twitter for several years, and you have no idea what they look like
or
or
sound
hear
like.
their story or whatever the case is. And so you get to see that, which has been really cool. So just want to thank you for what you're doing, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate that so much, and you're very welcome. Come back anytime. Definitely want to have you on one of the live panels in the future.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thanks, Dave.
Okay, thank you, Brian. If you're still watching this late in the program, you have to subscribe. Those are the rules. You've spent nearly an hour of your time with us. Just click subscribe.